Federal Elevator Residential Install. We documented a residential installation from start to finish to demonstrate just how straightforward the installation of one of our elevators is. Federal Elevator will provide you with all necessary drawings, instructions, and manual to help with the installation. HOISTWAY preparation. The hoistway must be finished by a contractor before the installation can begin. It must have one load-bearing wall for the rail installation and must be free of water. A pit drain is not required. After the drywall is installed, the contractor must cut out the areas to expose the wood where the rail bracket will be attached. This allows the elevator installer to see where to fasten the rail brackets. Installation of the rail bracket. Because of the close tolerances required with this equipment, the placement of the guide rail brackets is critical, as there is no adjustment once the rails are attached. Plumbing the rail brackets as accurately as possible before the installation of the guide rails will ensure a more accurate placement and will allow the mechanic to establish the tightest point in the runway. Begin the installation of the brackets with the top bracket. Center the bracket with the chalk line mark and level it off. With the two plumb lines hanging, continue to install the remaining rail brackets. Ensure that you keep the rail bracket leg centerline dimension constant, or within 1/4 inch. Use the plumb lines 2 as a guide to keep the rail brackets in line. Pit steel installation. Before the installation of the rails, the pit steel must be installed. The pit steel must be in line with the rail bracket legs. The pit steel is to be secured to the floor after fixing all of the guide rails. Verify that the floor is clean and level before installing the pit steel. If not, use the rails shims provided and shim level underneath the pit steel. Once the pit steel is set into place, the mechanic can begin to stack the rails. Place the rails in the center of the rail bracket legs and pit steel brackets, and tighten rail clips. Center the rail with the plumb line by eye and using a level. Once everything is plumb and at the required distance between guide rails, tighten the rails to the brackets using the rail clips. With the first rails stacked in place, the fish plates can be installed. Always remember to keep the machined face of the fish plate against the rail. Tighten the bolts. With the fish plate in place, the next set of rails can be stacked. Gently bring the next rail down onto the stacked rail until the tongue and groove match up. Insert the remaining bolts into each fish plate and tighten. This is done until the rails are completely stacked. Make sure that all fish plate bolts, rail clips, and rail bracket bolts are tight. Check that all rail joints are mated properly. If necessary, file the rail joints by hand to ensure a smooth transition. Cylinder assembly. After the installation of the rails, it is time to move onto the cylinder assembly. Anchor the pedestal bracket onto the wall. On top of the pit steel, you will see welded square angles where the pedestal sits into place. Place the pedestal bracket onto the pedestal, level off, and tighten bolts. Sit the cylinder cup into place. The plate of the cup has a diagonal cut which faces towards the back wall and to the right. Prior to lifting the cylinder, and for ease of installation, we suggest installing the flow control valve and bleeder ahead of time on the floor. Use high-grade Teflon tape to ensure a secure and leak-free fitting. Install the flow control valve in the correct direction. Restricted flow always points towards the pump. Lift cylinder using a chain hoist and place into cylinder cup. Install the cylinder bracket provided, ensuring that the clamp is approximately 12 inches below the cylinder head and pushed as far as you can to the right. Level the cylinder off using the cylinder bracket. Sheave assembly. The sheave assembly can now be mounted to the top of the cylinder. The cylinder top plate is attached to the underside of the sheave and must be removed and fastened to the cylinder head with the 3/4 inch bolt provided in the cylinder. Slide the sheave between the rails and drop it onto the top cylinder. There are 4 1/2-inch hex bolts holding the plate to the sheave. Fasten them together and tighten all bolts. The sheave has been designed with slots at each end of the plates that allow it to be moved 1/2 inch in either direction. If necessary, loosen bolts and shift the sheave assembly to ensure equal overhang on both sides. Once this is complete, and you are satisfied the cylinder is plumb, tighten up the sheave plate. With your scaffolding or ladder still in place, slide the 2 3/8 inch wire ropes through the sheave so both loose ends are at the bottom of the hoistway. Sling assembly. The sling assembly can now be assembled onto the rails. The finished sling will have to be located at the under travel distance below the lowest landing. The top of the platform should be approximately 1 to 1.5 inches below the finished floor of the lowest landing. Insert both sling uprights into the rail with the sling planks resting on the wood or blocks. Tighten the top horizontal sling channel to sling uprights and proceed to do the same for the bottom with the bottom safety assembly. Put a level across the sling planks and ensure that they are plumb to one another. Shim if necessary. Once this is done, tighten all 8 1/2-inch bolts and attach sling cross braces together to ensure that the distance between the legs is constant. Cable installation. During the installation of the sheave, ropes had been passed through the sheave while the scaffolding or ladder was in place. It is now time to fasten both ends of the 3/8 inch steel cable into the wedge sockets. We suggest roping the wedge sockets on the dead end hitch side, pit steel, first. Ideally, manually thread your bolts on the shackle rod halfway up so it provides maximum adjustment in either direction once the ropes become taut, should adjustment be required. Remove cotter pin from wedge and remove from wedge socket. Pass your first rope down through the long side of the socket and loop the cable back up towards the short side of the socket. At the same time, insert the wedge back up through the socket, pulling an excess of 18 inches to 24 inches of cable past the top of the socket. With the rope clips provided, fasten the excess rope to the stationary rope together. Ensure the cotter pins are placed into the shackles and your rope clips are fastened properly. Remember, you never saddle a dead horse. Review your wedge socket's position so that they are not twisted and running parallel to one another to avoid any twisting. You will later need to trim down the excess length, but this is done once you are satisfied of the final adjustments after running the lift is complete. Proceed with the next rope following the same steps. Now it's time to fasten the rope to the wedge sockets on the car sling assembly. Make sure that first rope you fasten is aligned correctly with the opposing end. Follow the same steps as earlier and pull the ropes as taut as possible. This will lessen the platform from dropping down too far into the pit once tension is applied. Fasten your clips onto the rope and provide same excess of rope as you did at the pit steel. Roping is now complete, and you can proceed in the machine room to install the pump unit and controller. Machine room. Install the hydraulic power unit and fix the electric control panel to the machine room wall. Verify that the electrical supply is as required by the specifications and is compatible with the supplied equipment meeting all local requirements. Read the electrical schematics provided before connecting motor and other equipment to the power supply. Once all connections are made and ready electrically, review the temporary operation startup procedure for up and down direction. Pump unit connection. Connect the hydraulic hose line or piping to suit local code requirements to the tank unit. Fill the tank with grade 32 hydraulic oil, making sure to fill the tank. Dry any excess spillage and inspect the tank for any potential leaks. Check oil level again after the oil is pumped to the hydraulic cylinder. The typical amount of oil required is 15 gallons. However, you may require more or less oil depending upon travel and the size of the tank. Safety block installation. Now that the slings and cables are installed, it is time to begin installing the safety block. Begin by raising the lift approximately 6 inches to get some tension on the cables. Unscrew the 1/4 inch nuts on the eye bolt and bring the bottom 1/4 inch nut all the way to the bottom of the eye bolt and bring the top 1/4 inch nut down so that all of your thread is up in the air and tighten. Pass the 1/2 inch threaded rod through the large slot on the pivot plate. On the front face of the safety block, there are 2 1/4 inch bolts and one 3/8 inch bolt. Unscrew the 3/8 inch by 1 inch bolt and pass it through the hole in the pivot plate. With the bolt through the pivot plate hole, rescrew it back into its original place. Screw the bolt in halfway and then place the smaller pivot plate slot onto the knurled roller. Tighten the 3/8 inch bolt all the way and then loosen it off a couple of turns so that the pivot plate pivots freely but is not too loose that it may slide off. With the springs compressed and the plate in the normal position, there should be a gap of around 1/16 of an inch between the knurled roller and the face of the guide rail. This should be the same for both sides. Platform installation. With the safeties in working order, you must install the platform onto the slings. Place the platform in the center of the 2 slings. The platform must be placed at a distance of 10 inches from the floor to the platform. This dimension is critical to ensure that the lift will not hit the rail brackets on the way up or down. Insert all 4 bolts under the platform and tighten by hand. Using a level and shims, level out the platform and tighten all 4 bolts. Ride the elevator to each landing and check the dimensions from the landing to the platform edge. If the tightest point was found at the beginning of the installation, this will be the landing where your running clearance will be set. If the running clearance needs to be adjusted at the tightest point in the hoistway, loosen all 4 bolts and set the running clearance. With the clearances all set and the platform level, the bolts can be tightened. Take the lift for another ride up and down the hoistway to check clearances at every bracket and landing. Cab installation. With the platform set, the cab installation can begin with the control wall. Before placing the control wall onto the platform, a few things need to be done. Firstly, all of the switches and cab wiring must be uncoiled from around the car station box and passed over the top of the control wall so that it lies on the front face. The safety switch, which is attached to the bottom of the car station box, must be passed behind the slings along with the travel cable. Then you must uncoil the travel cable and make sure there are no kinks in it. Pass the end in between the cylinder and the left guide rail when facing the slings. As you pass the travel cable through, walk the control wall into place. There are 2 holes at the bottom of the walls for bolts to pass through. Pass the 2 1/2 inch by 6 inch threaded rods through the vertical tabs which are welded onto the top of the control wall, and they attach to the horizontal tabs welded to the slings. Use 1/2 inch locks, flats, and nuts to fix these together. Using your level, make sure that the control wall is completely plumb before continuing to the next wall. After the control wall is secured and plumb, mount back walls and fasten to control wall using the bolts provided. Position side wall in place and fasten to back wall. Make sure to attach the safety switch under the slings on the bracket provided. The ceiling can now be placed on cab walls. Pre-drilled holes have already been provided in the ceiling. Use the bolts to fasten into place. Tow guard installation. Accordion gate installation. Once the ceiling is secured, slide the car accordion gate through the accordion car gate track. Bolt the car gate shroud onto wall face, where holes have been provided. Once secure, fasten accordion gate to car gate shroud. Travel cable installation. With the cab built and plumb, run the elevator up on temporary controls so that you can get underneath the elevator and install the travel cable and hanger. The travel cable hanger is usually placed on the wall opposite the rail wall. If it cannot be placed on this wall, place it on any other wall where there is no risk of interference. The height of the travel cable hanger is based on your travel and is installed using the following calculation. Once your height is determined, mount the travel cable hanger using the 4 holes provided. Once attached, pass the travel cable through the slings onto the sling cross braces. Pass the travel cable into the slots of the hanger and replace the cover. To get a proper hang, bring the elevator to the bottom floor and make sure that the cable does not hit the floor and that it is not being pulled. You can make sure that the travel cable is not pulling by taking the elevator to the top floor. Ensure that when you are traveling up the hoistway, the cable has a nice loop with no kinks. Switch mounting. Switch mounting brackets are placed in the proper location for you. All switches and switch brackets are marked with stickers for easy installation. Straighten out all switch cables, switches should be on ceiling, and separate each switch. The switch brackets are located either on the cab wall or on the top inside of the slings. Simply match the switch to the marking on the bracket and tighten the switch onto the bracket. Make sure to secure the loose switch cable so it doesn't get caught on anything. Switch cam mounting. There may be 3 switch cams that need to be mounted. This will depend on the installation. The 3 are the down limit, the up limit, and the final limit. If required, the down limit should be set to engage in your under travel. If required, the up limit should be set to engage above your over travel. The final limit is set to engage at approximately 1 inch above the up limit. Compact tape head installation, 2-inch steel tape. Locate an area as close to a rail as possible that can accommodate the footprint of the unit for the entire length of the hatch. Mount the top clamp retainer so the center of the tube corresponds to where you want the center of the tape to be located. Mount it high enough so the sensor unit will not hit the top clamp at the furthest extent of up over travel. Mount the bottom clamp retainer so the center of the tube is plumb with the top retainer tube, and do so low enough so the sensor unit will not hit the bottom clamp at the furthest extent of the down over travel. Drill a 3/8 inch clearance hole in the center of the tape, about 2 inches from the end. Install the top clamp on this end of the tape with 3 at 3/8 inch bolts. There will be about 1 inch of extra tape. Bend it slightly to clear the threaded rod. Install the top clamp into the top clamp retainer tube with a washer and 2 hex nuts. For now, have the hex nuts at the end of the threaded rod. Carefully unroll the tape and let it hang. Install the bottom clamp into the bottom clamp retainer tube with washers, spring, and hex nuts as shown. For now, have the hex nuts about 1 inch from the end of the threaded rod. Put a wedge of scrap material between the clamp and the clamp retainer to compress the spring about 1/2 inch. Pull the tape tight. Mark the tape to correspond to the center hole of the clamp and drill a 3/8 inch clearance hole. Cut the tape at least 2 inches beyond the hole. Remove the wedge and adjust the top clamp so the spring is compressed about 3/4 inch. The tape should be hanging straight. Tighten all nuts and bolts. Setting your over travel. The over travel is set by using provided mechanical dead stops to restrict cylinder motion above the top landing. Distance above the top landing is determined by local codes. Use 1/2 inch grade 5 bolts through the rails. Dead stop installation. A set of rail dead stops have also been provided to be mounted approximately 5 feet above the pit floor for servicing the elevator while inside the hoistway. These dead stops are only to be fastened when servicing and removed afterwards under normal operation. They are supplied with 2-foot chain should the installer wish to mount to the hoistway wall. Interlock installation. The interlock is a safety feature that prevents the door from being opened unless the car is present at the landing and completes an electrical circuit. They also ensure that the inner and outer doors are closed before the elevator is allowed to move. Haul station installation. Here is a view of the electrical cable inside the hoistway, awaiting for the installation of the haul stations. Completed machine room. Not much space is required for a machine room. For this particular installation, the machine room had to be located at the bottom of the stairs, which is not ideal for servicing, but is an example of how the team at Federal Elevator can work with the client to customize a lift for each home.